Today I'm going to talk to you mainly about how I approached my answer writing because I got around 494 marks in my GS papers, and a lot of it, according to me, was possible also due to a lot of answer writing practice and building content geared to answer writing practice as well. So the only thing that I can do is share how I did it. If certain things you feel you can implement in your own strategy and you can sort of make it your own, because I also learned a lot from, say, toppers copies before me and how they implemented stuff. So if things you think can be implementable in your own strategy, do that. If you think it's not something that you would want to ape completely, think about that as well, because not everything works for everyone. So I'm going to say all of that with this caveat, and anything else if you want to ask me towards the end of the presentation, you can do. And yeah, I think I'll just jump straight into it. So answer writing, I think, is a very, very important part of the mains examination specifically, because however much you read and however much you sort of learn new things and go through a lot of content, actually using that content within that limited time period of 3 hours is very, very challenging. Also in the, say if it's 10 markers, so in those 2 pages, making sure that you're writing an introduction, body and conclusion and the right content in the limited sort of time and the words that you have. So a lot of practice and sort of strategy, I think, can be used. So all of that, I think, you need to do before your mains examination. How many of you are giving the 2022 mains examination? Is any? Okay. Okay, fine. So I think some of you can, in the 2 months that are left to you, certain things you can try to implement. For others who are not, I think you can start from now on also. In terms of even before the mains preparation, before the prelims preparation, you have this time right now. So try to inculcate and improve that answer writing, something which I did as well, much before the time between the prelims and mains. Because answer writing is something that, when I started answer writing, my answers were also not good. There was a lot of content issues, a lot of time issues. But if you sort of try to learn from the answers that you've written, analyze them, learn from the feedback and improve, that can help in the long run. So I'll just go straight into it. So what are the basics of answer writing? And these are some things that I thought were important. First is understanding the demand of the question. So I think half your work is done if you're answering what is being asked of you. Because sometimes what happens is that, there's a certain question, you just focus on one keyword which is mentioned there and start writing about that because that's all you know. That won't fetch you marks. And this is something that happens initially when we don't have that content and we haven't read that much. So we just jump to things that we already know and we start writing them irrespective of what the question is asking. And if you look at how the questions are being asked in the previous few years, try to, even if there's something that you don't know, try to shape what you know according to what is being answered. So I think I'll try to show a few examples also where, there's certain question in the first half which is asked, and second is, how do you think, you try to mitigate this using this case or using the guidelines in this particular, say, WHO or NDMA. Even if you don't know the guidelines, make sure that you use that heading and through that write what you know. So you're at least attempting to answer the question. And the most that can happen is, you won't get marks for it, but at least if you completely don't mention that or try to answer the question, you won't get any marks. So make sure that you understand what is being asked and try to answer that only rather than just, randomly saying stuff. And make sure the answer is coherent in a way. So that coherence can come by using the words in the question. It should not seem to the examiner that, you're not answering it or there's no flow in the answer. So coherence and trying to answer the question in the way, in the word that it's asked is something that I think is very, very important. And if you manage to do just that in all the 20 questions, half of your work, maybe not half, but a lot of your work will be done. Secondly is content. You can't write good answers without good content. So you can't so I've seen sometimes people, what they do is they do a lot of answer writing practice. They come and, write answers every day and say that, we're not improving that much. You can't improve your answers if you don't have good content, what you're writing on. So while you're doing answer writing practice, also work on the content. Use your model answers which are being given to you. If, for example, if you're going through the MGP, or use other stoppers copies, or use the newspaper, use the other material that you're reading. go back to the material. So this is something that I used to do. I used to build sometimes content based on the newspaper, say certain examples for GS4. If I find certain examples, I'll just write it down in my ethics copy. So I had copies for GS1, 2, 3, and 4. So any sort of, say, some new cyber attack has happened, I used to go to my GS3 and write it under the security heading. And when I was writing, say, a question on cyber security in my MGP or otherwise on my previous question papers, I used to go back to the notes and add that there. And even after you've done an answer writing, do spend some extra time. Go back to the content, try to look for more content if you feel that that answer is not good enough. So building content is very important. For certain things like internal security, all of that, you can already prepare certain templates, prepare 2-3 pages notes for clear-cut topics in the syllabus. So once you have that content ready, you've understood what the question is asking, structuring becomes very important. And structuring, I think I wrote down a few things. Yeah. So structuring can be of two types, right? So structuring is, first is content-based structuring, and the second is spatial structuring. So firstly, the structuring in terms of introduction, body, and conclusion, that can usually be followed. I try to usually follow it. There are certain questions where, you're running out of time, so you'll just write a one-line conclusion, or sometimes you can, directly jump into the question if you have very less time at the end, but try to have some sort of introduction, 2-3 lines, which introduces it, then a body, which will contain a lot of points in terms of actually answering the question, and a conclusion, which can be forward-looking, which can include a quote, which can sort of include SDG goals or any sort of important terms. So in terms of that, you can have a structuring. Second is content-based structuring in terms of what the question is asking. So sometimes there are 3 parts to the question or 2 parts to the question. To understand those 2 and 3 parts, start with an introduction, use a subheading, answer the first part of the question, use a subheading, answer the second part of the question. What that structuring in terms of content structuring helps you to do is, it helps you also to make more points and think in those lines. Sometimes when you're just writing without any headings, you just get into the flow, you forget what was asked. But if you tell yourself, 1 page I'll devote to the first half of the question, second page I'll devote that, and you write those headings, you can also think of more points, right? So the first is content-based structuring. Second is spatial structuring in terms of how to make the answer look better. So first is obviously underlining. Don't underline randomly. I've seen people underline the most random things, because if you underline the things that are important, the examiner looks, I think at least you can assume that he would look at them rather than the other stuff. So underline the important stuff, the things that you think are crucial to the answer. Second is spatial structuring in terms of, say, margins. So if you're starting your subheading from here, if you start your points from here, it looks a little neat. Even if your answer writing is your writing is not that good, handwriting is not that good, this spatial structuring makes it look a little better, and you can read the answers better. Use sort of points. Again, just as sir was saying, I used to make examples whenever I used to use an example to differentiate it from the points on 1, 2, 3, which I used circles for. I used a triangle to set it apart. So these things you can come up with yourselves in terms of how to spatially structure the answer, leaving margins, where to start the next point, then the sub parts and all of that, right? So this was the structuring based thing. Fourth is speed, and the speed and content thing, you need to always maintain a balance, because sometimes what happens is that you can't complete the paper at all, and then there's no point to the content. You're writing 2-3 answers, first few answers, beautiful handwriting, beautiful content, but then you're not attempting 5 questions at the end. So it doesn't sort of get you those extra marks, because you'll get those 1-2 marks in the beginning, but you'll do away with the 15 markers at the end. So make sure that you're practicing, and practice really helps. And not just in terms of, say, if you're writing a 3-hour test, that's well and good. Make sure that you put those limits on yourself, because if you're, for example, attempting the paper at home, there'll be no one standing on top of you and like saying that, finish it in those 3 hours, but you have to set those limits for yourself. Even in the final paper, try to set time limits apart from the 3 hours as well. So 1 hour mein how many questions should be done? Or something that I used to do was, so for example, if I've set 7 minutes for one question, the early ones, then if I'm completing, say, the first question by 8 minutes, then I used to make sure that the next question I'll complete in 6 minutes, so that it doesn't carry on for that long. If you're, say, 8 minutes, then another one 8 minutes as well, third one 8 minutes as well, then for the end you have very little time. So if you're taking more time for one, take less time for the second one. So those sort of things and you need to come up with and start practicing in a fixed environment. If you can't attempt the full length paper, make sure that you attempt 3 questions and complete it in 7 minutes each or 6 minutes each respectively. So work on speed. And if you have all of these ready, I think more or less the structure of the paper is done to get those extra marks. If, for example, you've already given your attempt, you haven't got enough marks, how to make your answer better if you've sort of worked on all these 4 things already, that is where the embellishments sort of fetch you the extra marks. So embellishments can be in terms of, say, diagrams, they can be flowcharts, they can be maps, say, in geography. You can sort of make boxes, arrows, all of that. Also embellishments in terms of something that I use, say, for GS4, certain examples, certain quotes, then certain keywords also. So I used to prepare a list for things that I could use in terms of keywords like, Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas or New India or $5 trillion economy, which you can sort of put anywhere if you can't think of anything else. So these are certain things that you can think of and prepare a ready collection yourself, because these things during the examination time you have absolutely no time to think. You look at the question, you answer, whatever has been literally burnt into your head, those are the only things you remember at that time. You can't remember things which you've just cursorily read once. So you need to do this homework before you enter the examination hall. And these things in terms of preparing a set of examples, revising it multiple times. I also sort of made a list of 10 Padma Shri awardees, 10, 15 who were sort of important and in various different fields. So I used them across my 4 papers wherever I could use them. So keep looking out for such material, keep collecting it. For those who are, say, not giving the mains this time, start doing it from now on only, because it won't happen in a day. For those who are giving it, if you have a ready collection of quotes, if you have a ready collection of whatever material you have, just try to revise it and try to use these as embellishments. So for GS2, you have committees. For GS1, again, society, you can have certain examples, GS2 committees or, say, articles, parts of the constitution. So for each paper, the demand is a little different, but these embellishments can sort of help you make your answer prettier, better, all of that, right? And again, an analysis, practice, improvement. Just keep on writing won't help. On all these parameters, when you write a paper, when you've completed, for example, a test paper or your own paper, go back. Just don't go to the next one without thinking. Go back, analyze it, look at each question, think how it could have been made better. So something which I used to do was, even if I got, say, good marks or good remarks in a paper, I used to look at as to how it could have been made better. What could have been a better introduction? What could have been an example that was in my notes which I did not use? So I used to write that in the margin. Going back to it, next time making sure that if that question comes, I will use it. So I did not have a revision strategy per se. So sometimes what people do is they, revise it, have a revision strategy कि एक हफ्ते में मैं एक बार revise करूँगी, फिर एक महीने में करूँगी, फिर my revision practice was my answer writing only. I used to actually spend time with the answers, go back to it, and that way it gets, you sort of imbibe it more when you're writing it, using it, rather than just revising it per se for my mains. Yeah, and even if you don't know the answers to certain questions, this is something which happens, say, in GS3 this time, try to use whatever knowledge you have and answer it in the best possible way with confidence. Because at that point, everyone is on the same platform as you. If you don't know, it's likely that more than half the people also won't know. So just tell yourself that the most I can do is give my best at that point. So try to answer with confidence. This is something that I used in my GS3 paper this time, because there were a lot of questions about blue LEDs, S400, which no one knew about. But whatever limited knowledge I had, I tried to complete all the pages that had been given to me with some sort of reasonable content, not just random content, with whatever I knew and implementing it and trying to using my knowledge of LEDs, say, in blue LEDs and trying to just sort of put those things in that way. So this is something that you can do.